So today we're going to be talking about programming. We're also going to be talking about emotion, because often or not, they don't really go very well together. And it's got me into hot water before. It's something that I've been learning and sort of developing as a person to do. I've been programming for donkey's years, all right, a long time. And it's when a programmer tries to treat a real-world human emotional situation like they would as a program, as a bug in a system, as, you know, just developing a system, developing that person out of that situation, or trying to perhaps debug their emotional issue to get them from one place to another. You just simply can't do that. You can't treat someone like a machine. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, with programming, of course, there's two sides to it, really. You're either developing something or you're debugging something. So when you're developing something, you're basically working from a blank slate. You probably should be working from like a PRD, like a project requirements document, a shopping list of features that you have to build, and you just basically hammer down that list and you develop those features for that application. Now, once that application is done and out there, you then have to maintain that, and that becomes buggy. So you fix that, and you fix the lists of bugs and stuff. Usually the bugs are logical issues. So perhaps there's some data that has got out of sync, or it's sort of something's happened at this point in this application that you have to sort of fix, and that's usually a logical issue. And if you think of all the control flows that everyone uses, you've got the for loops, you've got the if statements, you've got the switch statements, while loops, and blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff, that basically dictates the flow of the application. And, usually a fix would be like an if statement. So if blah, 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 then do this, else do that, else if do that, blah, 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 blah. Or, maybe you're iterating around a loop wrong or whatever. But usually the fix is very black and white once you've got to that point. Once you've debugged it and you understand what's wrong with it, it will either work or it won't work, right? And that is a very cold way of looking at problems, and that's how we deal with problems with programming. You attack it from a very unemotional way. Now, I've built several applications, mobile applications, web applications in my time, and I certainly haven't shaken the hand of everybody who uses that application. So I don't know how they have perhaps interpreted the application in an emotional way, right? So I don't know the difference that's made that person's life, whether that's made them angry, whether that's made them sad, whether that's sort of improved their life. I would hope so. Otherwise, why would they use the application? And when you get a bug, if we talk about the other side of programming, when you're actually dealing with bugs, you're often dealing with logical issues, like I've mentioned. You're dealing with, this has happened and I need to fix this. You're not thinking about, yay, this is going to help so many people. It's going to make them feel better. It's going to make them jump out of bed and start the day with a spring in their step. You're thinking about numbers. So yes, the person in the person table might have a name, right, associated to it, but really you only care about the ID in that person's table, because that ID is the unique reference or whatever ID it is, identifier to that record. You don't actually care about the person behind that record, you care about the data. And that is a very black and white, cold way of attacking the day-to-day problems we have with programming. The day-to-day things that we do when we are developing and debugging systems. You don't think about the person behind the problem, you think about the problem itself, the data and so forth. Right, so that's the programming stuff. Let's now talk about the everyday stuff, the emotional stuff. So, and I've fallen into this trap before, especially when I work stupid amounts of hours a day, and my head is in I've just fixed like 20 bugs, or 50 bugs or whatever, and my brain will only attack problems now in a logical, methodic kind of like way. And then I suddenly get told that such and such is in a bad situation, or Maybe there is a mental health issue, or maybe there is, a problem at someone else's workplace or whatever. I hear a snippet of information from someone about some situation that someone else is in, right? I can't help but then think about those steps of how I would rectify that issue in a very sort of cold, logical way, especially if there hasn't been a huge gap between my working day, and then being told this kind of thing. I need to have that sort of time period where you sort of come back down to reality and you treat everyone like human beings, not as unique identifiers in a database table. And it's got me into deep water before, where I've kind of talked about maybe my views on things, and being very cold and being very unemotional, perhaps unsupportive of the person in question or the situation in question. Yes, the solution that I've come up with would probably work, but in order to get to that step, to actually solve the problem that person is in, I haven't taken account of the emotional impact that person is going through, or those steps to rectify that issue would have that impact on that person. And that is something I think that a lot of programmers have to deal with. It's the realizing that when someone tells you about a problem in someone else's issue or their issue, it's the not jumping the gun and telling them how to solve it, how you would solve it, how a machine would solve it, but being a little bit more empathetic, being a little bit more responsive, and basically just listening. Yes, in your head you could be coming up with an application that would solve that person's problem if they were just a record in a database, but that isn't actually going to help that person out. That person is probably going to think you're a bit of an idiot, a little bit sort of cold and not very friendly. And it's something that certainly I have dealt with before, and I take my hat off to people who don't work in programming, who work with people on an everyday basis to try and get those people out of their problems, because that is something that I probably wouldn't be able to do because of the tendencies I have with programming. So with programming, when I attack a problem, like I said, it's very down the line, it's very sort of black and white. There is logical things in my head. I'm going through if statements, for statements, and all of that stuff. With people, when you're talking to people, you have to think of it from more of like I said, an emotional way, right? So let me give you an example where an emotional attached problem can't be solved with perhaps a programmer's logical way of thinking. So it's a very common one: weight gain or weight loss, right? You're either trying to gain weight or you're trying to lose weight. Well, if you took that problem in a programming kind of way, if there was an application and that application had a user, and that user wanted to either lose or gain weight, then the feature that application would have to go through, or the process that application would have to go through, would be either to eat more or eat less, exercise more. And so you would run that application, and you would run a series of checks. So you would be checking for target weight, maybe, so that would be an if statement, and therefore the person would be going on the scales to check that out. So you would have perhaps a scale processor for the scale, and then you would have checks on perhaps the food that you eat. So maybe that would be recorded in a database and so forth, and you either gain weight or you either lose weight. And the fault of not gaining weight or not losing weight, depending on your target, would be the factors that you plug into the data. So, how much have you eaten today, or how much exercise have you done today? That kind of thing. How many calories have been burnt against how many calories are consumed? Now that is extremely black and white, and you simply cannot apply the program, the logic of that program, to the person, the real person, the human, who's having those emotional concerns, those emotional problems with food, because you just simply can't. You simply can't say to someone, "Oh, well, just eat more, or just eat less, or why don't you go and exercise a little?" Because there's obviously an emotional attachment to why that person is in that situation, and of course, there's other things as well. There's medical issues that could gain weight or reduce weight. There could be genetics involved. So all of those other variables just simply cannot be plugged into an application. And the emotional variable, the emotional attachment to food or emotional attachment to not having food, simply can't go into that application either. Yes, there are fitness applications out there that will help you track your weight and your diet, which is fine. But that alone won't solve the person's emotional issues. It will obviously help them along their journey, but that isn't the only thing that they need to deal with, because there is obviously an emotional thing going on there. Basically, mental health just can't be solved through apps and apps alone. You need to think about it from the emotional perspective. So the point I really want to make here is that if someone comes to you with some sort of problem and you think about it in a logical, methodic, programmy kind of way, that's fine, but you also need to take a step back and think about the person and their emotional needs as well. Because if you don't, then they are just going to clam up and go somewhere else, because you're not actually helping them out. Yes, you might be telling them what they need to do, but that isn't the only thing that you should be doing. You should be listening to them, and you should be supporting them as a person and as a friend, and as a human being. And I'm certainly not perfect at this, because there is so many situations that I can remember where someone has said something to me and I've just gone, boom, this is what you need to do. And that hasn't helped the situation at all. It's like, yes, I know what I need to do. It's just I can't do it because my head is not in the right place. And that is something that, like I said, the program just can't cope with. And this is where I'm going to hand it off to you. If you've got any comments or thoughts on this subject, then do put them down in the comments section below, especially if you've been on the receiving end of someone trying to give you advice in a very cold, logical manner. Perhaps it was the correct advice, but maybe the approach was wrong. Then put your thoughts down in the comments section below. If you're also a programmer and you have a sort of a strategy for when someone talks to you about a problem, like one of the problems I've mentioned, and you do something in order to not return a very cold response, then do put your thoughts down as well. But as always, everyone, happy coding, and I will be seeing you again very shortly in the next video. Thanks ever so much. Bye.